Nyesha McCauley, and welcome to Civic Beat. It is election season, and as it this very important time of year, we know that we're going out to the polls and electing our representatives. But along with that, there are a few questions and answers that we may bring with us as we are thinking about our elected representatives. So, in order to get through some of those questions and answers, I have joining me today the Secretary of the State of Connecticut, Stephanie Thomas. Welcome, Secretary Thomas, to Civic Beat. Thank you for joining me.
So happy to be here. And that is a great civic beat, quite literally.
Oh yes, yes, yes. I love our intro music there. Well, we have a lot of ground to cover, but before we jump right in, I thought we would start with just sort of reintroducing you, or for those who don't quite remember that you're newly elected yourself. Tell us just a little bit more. You're 9 months into your term as Secretary of the State. Tell us a little bit more about Stephanie Thomas. How'd you get started on your journey and
My goodness. How
in your
long
role?
is this show? No, I'll try to distill it down into 1 minute. A lot of people didn't know who I was when I ran for Secretary of the State. I had spent one term in the State House as a state representative of the 143rd District, which is Norwalk, Wilton, and Westport. And prior to that, I had a 30-year career as a nonprofit fundraising consultant, first for others, and then I opened my own consulting firm in New York City. And I had never thought about getting involved in politics, but if I could tell people nothing else, you can do it. I got involved because there was an issue I thought needed an additional voice. So I ran for office. I lost my first election, but then I ran again and I won, and now I'm serving as secretary. So if I can pass along any advice, it's if you think you have something to share or a skill set, just get out there and do it.
Yeah, that is so important. Thank you for sharing a little bit about your background and your journey. I'm also wondering about your role as Secretary of the State. It is an elected position, so you ran for office. What did you hear out there? Like, do people know what you do in the role? And if not, tell us what the Secretary of the State does in your role.
No one has any idea what I do. I literally start every talk I give, like, raise your hand if you know what the Secretary of the State does. And on a good day, maybe 5 out of 50 people might raise their hand. Um, I think everyone remembers from school, at some point you learned about the three branches of government:
Hmm.
executive branch, a legislative branch, and judicial. And here in Connecticut, our executive branch is comprised of 6 people: governor, lieutenant governor, secretary, attorney general, treasurer, comptroller. So the secretary has jurisdiction, if you will. The major thing we do, actually, we are the place where businesses and nonprofits and organizations file their formation paper. So if you're starting a business or an organization, you're actually interacting with our office. But secretaries around the country have been in the news more recently because we also oversee the administration of elections. And we do a lot of other things. I tell people, think back to the term secretary and what it used to mean 30, 40 years ago. We are the repository of an awful lot of records, laws, etc. I think someone called our office looking for something from like 1842, and we had to look it up, and we had it, thank goodness. Yes, we do a lot of things, but elections and business services are the two biggest.
That really thank you for that. That's really covers a wide range of like public facing duties that you have there. So your engagement with the public is like 24/7. It sounds like. Uh, but elections is definitely one of the things that your office oversees. Tell us a little bit about some of the initiatives that you have carried forward or started anew as you went into this role as Secretary of the State.
It's a good question. When I ran for office, I thought one thing, but when I was in the legislature, I was vice chair of our elections committee. So a lot of people would come to testify or talk about certain policies. And it became really clear to me that many people, and even from conversations with my own friends, my husband, etc., it became clear that people had not really gotten what I like to call civics you can use education. We may have learned about the Bill of Rights or the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, but when it came to how does policy get adopted or how do you move things forward, no one teaches that information. And I thought as secretary, we had a unique opportunity to really highlight, if you will, and sort of bring back this concept of civic education and civic engagement and teach people how civics and how government is supposed to and can be there to help them get through their everyday lives. So when I took office in January, I started thinking about with my team ways that we can reach people in the community. And I think to your first question, we had to educate people like, what does the Secretary of the State do? Mm-hmm. Because I would show up and no one knew. So we started a few initiatives. I won't go into all of them, but they're all designed to do the same thing, meet people where they are and start the conversation. So one of the first things we started doing were civic trivia events that we hold at libraries, and it's for kids as young as 7. And what we found is that kids as young as 7 can't go anywhere without their parents. So their parents are there and they're learning together. And it really just opened up how little many of the parents knew about, some of the basics of government. Like one question I like to say to people all the time, I say, is election day always the first Tuesday in November? And most people say yes, but it's actually the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So that right away gets people's attention, like, wait, this is like a fundamental thing that everyone should know. Mm-hmm. We also started just a social media series. I have very short hair, so I travel around the state and I go to barbershops, our hair salon sometimes, because that's the place where a lot of people in communities go to like get the news and talk about issues of the day. So we go and we talk to people about voting and how they feel government is responsive to their needs and that type of thing. Again, just trying to get people to think about civics as something beyond election day, but something they have to be engaged with year round. And I won't bore you for much longer, but one of the really great things, we do a lot of work with election workers, so definitely registrars of voters and town clerks, but it became clear to us that no one really talks about poll workers. And we have thousands of poll workers around the state without whom we would not even be able to have election day. So we thought it'd be great to go around and give them their day. So we do poll worker appreciation ceremonies where we invite poll workers. Some of them have been serving for like 45, 50 years every single year. And we recognize them and we try to give them a little bit of, time in the sun, but also to let people know that it's like your friends and neighbors, people you see at the supermarket who are administering our elections and helping us with our right to vote, and not, someone sitting on a hill somewhere plotting the demise of our democracy. So those are just a few examples, but we are doing many, many things.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. And I don't think anything that you said is boring, but that's just me. Here I am hosting a show called Civic Beat, right? So but I love the activity that engages all of us, not just on election day, but like all the time, right? Because we know that, particularly in the last couple of years, we're all paying attention to this thing called democracy a little bit more, and leaning in and understanding that it is something worth protecting, right? And that we shouldn't take it for granted. So I just appreciate hearing all that you are and your office is doing to engage Connecticut. So that is fantastic. Before
And
we,
if I
oh,
could,
go
sorry,
ahead.
I
Yep.
just thought of something I should
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
mentioned because it's about protecting, but also about understanding.
Mm.
And one of our programs that I love the most, maybe, is something called our CEO program, which stands for, you'll like this, Civically Engaged Organizations. And it's for businesses, nonprofits, houses of worship, any organization can join. And we got this idea. I'm a small business owner myself. And every business and nonprofit that I know, they are already doing good work for the community, whether it's sponsoring an event, doing like a cleanup or a backpack drive before school. And I thought, they are already great civic partners. So, what if we ask them to kick it up a notch and ask them to help us get the word out about this civic engagement, reminding people when an election's coming, letting them know how to find their polling place, letting college students help teach them like how it works when you go away to school. So, we have over 150 now organizations that have joined our CEO program to help us do that work. So, like, there's 150 more of you out there helping to spread the message.
That is fantastic and exciting. I think I love the CEO. Like that. That feels real official and important. So I think that's great.
You too can be a CEO.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, what's the sign up? I have a little cheat sheet. CEOpledge.ct.gov.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So we will definitely provide more information for in ways that everyone can connect. I do definitely want to follow up and become a CEO myself. So you see how that rolls off the tongue? I want to be a CEO myself. All right. Well, Secretary Thomas, municipal elections are here, and folks are really paying attention in their local towns, and particularly in Hartford, as we move on towards this election season. And if people are visiting your site or on their social media platforms, they're seeing something looking like a hashtag Vote Local. Can you talk about what that is and why it's important to our viewers?
Oh my goodness, yes, I can. Vote local. In its simplest form, we were just trying to find a way to remind people that where you live is really important. And there have been so many campaigns for businesses about buy local, shop local, eat local. We're trying to remind people to vote local. When I travel around the state and I speak with people, I often hear them talking about subjects like property taxes or like what type of zoning is allowed in their neighborhood, or how the school budget funding is being spent. And these are all things determined on the local level, yet you see a huge drop in participation. In a presidential election year, we're looking at turnout anywhere from 70 to 80%, some towns higher, some towns slightly lower. But in a municipal year, you're looking at an average of under 35%. And in a place like Hartford, you're sometimes looking at 6 to 9%
Mm.
turnout. So it gives me a lot of frustration because when people say, I don't trust government, it doesn't listen, it doesn't do what we want, it's really because so few people are participating. Like, that's the barrier for entry. You can't expect people to be elected who are representative of the majority if the majority are not voting. You're just giving away your rights and relying on luck, which to me is no way that I want to live my life.
Mm.
So we're really trying to encourage people, don't just vote in the presidential years, don't just vote in the gubernatorial years, vote in every single election.
Yes, I agree. And I had a young lady who was a little bit younger than me. I'm not going to say how old I am, but she was a little bit younger than me, and she felt as though like, and she was like millennial age, and she felt as though there's been a push for millennials to sort of pay attention to the national races, and they think of local politics as like, oh, that's my grandmother's, like my grandmother pays attention to the local stuff. And I just thought that was a fascinating comment. And I'm like, wow, okay. So I love Vote Local initiative because I think for all the reasons that you stated, these are the things that are really impacting your everyday life, and so voting locally is more important. I would say it's equally important, maybe, but
Equally is
yeah.
important. And I think what I saw when I was a state representative, I hadn't had this viewpoint before, but as a state representative, I often had to work both with my mayor and first selectman. I represented three towns, so I had to work with them, and also the congressional delegation, because, sometimes I could go to my congressman to ask for funding that the state might match that would ultimately trickle down to the town. And when we weren't all working together, I, that sometimes can delay progress. It can mean you don't get as many resources. So I think it's important for voters to also think about that complete ecosystem. It's not enough for the president to believe something that you believe. You really want to carry it through all the way down, because the president could put out the best program, or be against something that you're for, and if it doesn't trickle down, it does you no good on the ground. So I like, again, there's nothing, well, every election is equally
Yes,
as
yes.
important, what I'll say.
Yes, yes. Um, so, speaking of elections and just staying there and drilling down a little bit more, I know the national ranker has included, and even locally, the idea and the issue around election security and misinformation. So it definitely has been gaining traction over the last few years. Can you speak to how your office works to ensure election security and combats misinformation?
Sure. In terms of security, it's really, let me try to simplify this as much as possible. A lot of the conversations that we saw nationally never would have happened or had happened in Connecticut, because we never moved away from paper ballots. So there were states doing things on the internet, etc. We don't have that issue. So what we have been focused on since I took office, and certainly the office has done many things over the past decade, but we have been working very diligently with the federal security agencies and making sure all of those best practices and information is being passed along and adopted by the local election staff. Here in Connecticut, we have 169 towns that all administer their own elections. Our office is there to make sure that they are doing so within the guidelines of the law. So we have a really good sort of ecosystem going from national security all the way down to the local level. In terms of misinformation, that is a bit more insidious. And when we start thinking about generative AI and what might or might not be possible there, it's going to take due diligence from every single one of us, not only to use this gray matter between our ears, if something sounds too incredulous, it probably is too incredulous to believe. Our office, we have a misinformation officer. who culls through the dark web and social media, etc., and just flags anything that our legal team looks through to make sure it's not factually inaccurate. And I like to give examples. I'm trying to think of like a real example, not this year, but prior. There was a story circulating about someone had come across, I forget, something like a garbage bag filled with ballots.
Mm.
But the story was circulating before any of our ballots had actually been printed. So there
Mm.
were no ballots that could have been in this garbage bag.
Mm-hmm.
So something like that, we push back on and we put the truth out there. But it really will take all of us doing our own due diligence and not sharing things that might be false.
Yeah, good information. And so for security at the polls and things like that, I know your office has a phone number, and we can get that information to our viewers later in the program. That if they see something, they can call a number. But I think also social media and AI, as you're describing, is something that everyone needs to be very mindful of. So yeah, no, this
Yeah,
is.
I was looking to see
Mhm.
if I have my hotline number here, but I don't have it here on my little cheat sheet. And people should just be aware there. So our hotline is usually around legal issues. So if something is happening that is not legal in Connecticut, most people call us. But there are other hotlines run by like the state parties, typically have a hotline. Other entities have hotlines, like, for example, if someone just wants to report something that might be of concern. But all of that information will start getting out there as we move closer to November. But I'll definitely get you our hotline information because, as you know, we have a primary in some towns in Connecticut on September 12th.
Yes, and thank you for that excellent segue because I was going there. So, Civic Beat is seen by definitely viewers in Hartford, Connecticut, which is where we are sitting. I'm sitting in Hartford right
You
now.
too.
Okay, yes, that's right. I don't think we're kind of located next to each other. Okay, anyway, but so Hartford definitely has a primary on September 12th. And Hartford is unfortunately known for its rather low voter turnout. Statistically, that's been the case. Um, Share a little something with our viewers about the importance of coming out to vote. Given that statistically Hartford is falling into that category continuously. What do we need to do in order to turn that around?
It's an interesting question, and when I have the solution, then maybe I'll just retire because that is what we are spending so much of our time doing.
Yeah.
Um, it will come as no surprise, right? Like people have different reasons for not voting. Um, One of the things I've noticed is that there seems to be a correlation between advertisement and people even having it on their radar. So, obviously, presidential elections, gubernatorial elections, you can't turn around for 5 minutes without seeing an ad on television. Every news program is talking about it. It seems like every day. So, people just have it top of mind. With these local elections, I think sometimes something like a primary just escapes their notice because we're thinking about November. And if you don't have it on your calendar in your busy life, you just forget. So, having shows like this, having the media help get the word out, our office is certainly trying to do that. That's one thing. You talked about millennials, but I think it's true of many groups of people. They are hyper focused on national. And again, unless the national news is talking about an upcoming election, they forget there's one in their own backyard. Um, and there are no easy solutions. The easiest solution, in my opinion, would be funding the Secretary of the State's office for public education. So then we could have ads up on television reminding people about an election. But most people don't realize there's been very little federal investment in our election system for the last couple of decades, and same at the state level. We did have a budget the last several years, mainly because of COVID, to just educate people when the election was coming, how to file an absentee ballot, how to find your polling place, how to register. But in the current biennium budget, we have no money allocated for any kind of public information. So if I wanted to put an ad up or make some flyers and hand them out, I literally have $0 to do it. So I think we as a people need to reassess what our priorities are. And we have many things that need funding, but I really feel that none of that happens if we are not able to exercise our right to vote and we're not educated about how best to do that.
Absolutely. So I'm going to put a call to action out there because I just heard something that's like, well, we need to advocate to our representatives that we need to fund this. This is something we should all be really pushing for. You need a budget.
We do need a, this is like the American franchise, and the fact that no government entity invests in public information. It's not taught in schools, and this is why I think you see so many disaffected voters, because if you're not learning about civics in school and no one is teaching you about it as an adult, people get frustrated. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. It's all very technical language. There are a lot of very complicated election laws. Like there's seldom an answer that is very straightforward. Like, oh yeah, you do this. It's like you do this in a primary, this in a general.
Yes.
This. So we need education if we want to see people participate.
Yes, I totally agree. And I'm thinking about your CEO program as well. And that if we could get more people involved and signed up for that, I think that would go a long way in really advancing the ideas that, that it's a primary and, and the reasons that you stated why people may not be paying attention. It just sounds like if we had more CEOs, we could also address that as well.
Our office is trying to do everything we can with no budget. But
Yes.
we also have a little joke we say around here, which is you get the elections you pay for. Um, and I'm not sure we as a state want our legacy to be that the secretary was able to figure out as many free things as possible in the hopes that people would vote.
That's right. Well, Secretary Thomas, we are at our time. I do really appreciate you joining Civic Beat. I appreciate you sharing loads of information with our viewers. I know that there is ways that they can connect with your office. If you could just give us the quick version of how to connect with you.
Sure. We have some great information up at civics101.ct.gov. A lot of how-tos on any number of subjects. The best way, let's see, the best way to be in touch with my office is probably to Google it, but you can also write to what's the best person? I don't know. Google it. If you go to our website, Secretary of the State of Connecticut, it depends on if you have a business question, an election question, etc. If you go there, you'll get to the right department faster.
All right. Well, Secretary Thomas, we do have a primary September 12th. Please go out and vote, but also come back after the primary, and we can talk again for November.
Sounds good. November 7th. Save the date.
Yes.
Make your plan.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining me here on Civic Beat. And remember, our democracy, like our communities, must be one in which we each have access and we each participate. So make your local democracy and your community great today. Till next time, be well.